Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Yogasthah Kuru Karmani Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjaya Siddhya Siddhyo Samo Bhutva Samatvam Yoga Uchyate बुद्धियुक्तो जहातीह उभे सुकृतदुष्कृते तस्माद्योगाय युज्यस्व योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्. These two verses we have seen are from the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, number 48 and 50. Just to reiterate, these are the definitions of yoga in terms of our attitudes towards the performance of action and how the action must go through the sieve of dharma, and whatever is not in keeping with the universal tenets of non-injury uh, and the golden rule of doing unto others as is needed, as you want yourself to be done to, so those kinds of actions are eschewed and given up. And in the process of that giving up, what happens is that one grows as a human being to to be more accommodating of other people in the universe and more in line with Ishvara, who is an embodiment of Dharma, Bhagavan, God, who is an embodiment of Dharma. And then, because of that, there is less conflict in life. More Dharma means less conflict, more the ability to go with the flow. And that is a very, very important thing. And finally, the the swadharma component, following whatever that needs to be followed in terms of one's quote unquote duty, kartavya, becomes extremely important, because this kartavya takes precedence over strong prejudices and preferences, which control basically control the people's what's the word for it, people's actions and reactions. And so this way, the one sort of grows closer to Ishvara by redefining one's identity, not as a liker of objects or a disliker of people, for example, but as a devotee. And this reminting of one's identity becomes important, because the more one goes with the flow, the more one is the flow. And when we look at the world of animals, for example, this is not an instruction for dogs and cats. Even though I'm assured time and again that the cat is taking the class with me, the dog is taking the class, and people send photos also of them sitting with their pets. The class is not for the cat, not for the dog, it is for you, because neither the dog nor the cat nor the chihuahua, whatever types of dogs you may have, Siamese cat, chihuahua, dog, they do not violate the will of Bhagavan. They do not have to pray, let there be more of you in me as me, and let there be less of me. That's why the word for animals in the Shastra is muktaha. They are already free of what? All these stupid, silly complexes centered on the self. They are totally free. They don't have to strive to be free, because they are already in line with Bhagavan. The dog doesn't say, look at the independence of the cat. It doesn't keep on wagging its tail whenever. It doesn't have to feel that it should be loyal. It can swat the owner and still the owner loves it. It has so much independence. And it can walk freely on the roads and go jump into people's yards. And I have to be on this leash all the time. What is wrong with me? I think I'm going to be more like a cat. The dog doesn't say that way. And neither the cat says, I want to be a monkey. No. They seem to be, at least from the look of it, seem to be accepting of what they are. However, Bhagavan has made for them whatever they have in life, they go along with the program of the universal laws. They don't try to flout the universal laws. And same thing we see in the world of trees. In the world of trees, the birthday of the trees is there today, I'm told. So as we wish all the trees a very happy birthday, we also bring in the example of the trees. The oak tree doesn't say, what is this always standing still in the forest and everything? I need to go to the beach. I'm going to take myself and all my descendants to the beach. No, it grows in the forest, majestic, beautiful, happy. It is there. And neither does the tamarind tree says, I'm tired of producing sour tamarinds all the time. I want to produce sweet mangoes. No. It is only the human being that has the ability, that has the free will to flout the laws. And flouting the laws because of this free will is something that has to be, that's why we need to reverse this. The free will is both a blessing and the opposite of it, and almost a curse. It's a blessing because it helps me to discover myself. It discover the truth of myself, a privilege that is denied to animals because they don't even need it at this point. They don't need it. They are happy being who they are. In this particular lifestyle, they are just articulating some past karma. They don't need it in this particular lifestyle. And maybe next lifestyle they'll be a human being, and then they will have the simultaneous blessing and the opposite of that, the curse of having the free will. The free will is a burden if you do not know how to use it. And the free will is a blessing is if you harness it to make the choices that lead to the pursuit of the truth of the self. And so therefore, even before one joins the wagon of Vedanta, and hitches one's pursuit to the to Vedanta, even before that, we have to make sure of something. We have to make sure that there is in all other areas of our lives, what are we doing? We are following whatever there is to follow. So the free will is sublated, out of deference and devotion to the order, which is the Lord, which is a manifestation of the Lord. So when in that sublation of the free will, the ahankara, does namaskara. This is what the whole thing is. The ahankara bends. And in that bending, there is a certain surrender, and one is confronted with the inevitability of not being able to control one's surroundings, not being able to control one's, not being able to control Adi Deva, the acts of God. Adhibhuta, the acts of other beings around you. And why? One is barely even able to manage one's own mind. One is not able to manage one's mind, one is not able to manage one's body, and one is certainly not able to manage the surroundings, starting with the significant other. One is not able to manage anyone, anything. And so this being the truth, this being the case, there is a certain relief, a palpable relief of letting go. You manage what you can manage. And whatever is not for you to manage, you give it to Ishvara. Why take on Ishvara's portfolio? Ishvara is already doing whatever needing to be done. Why do you want to take Ishvara's portfolio and then feel stressed and burdened? This is what happened to Arjuna. It's like that story of the woman who was carrying a huge basket of groceries to take to the market to sell. And she got on a local train, because she wanted to go from one place to another, like a Indian version of some kind of a metro train. And then as she got on, the people decided to help her to lay her burden down. Huge basket, bigger than her head, three times bigger than her head. She was carrying, and then with great difficulty she sideways, she got on the train. And everybody said, "Oh, sister, let's give you a hand." And they made room. It was a crowded train, but they made room. And they said, "Let's give you a hand. Let's put this burden down so you can just stand, and relax." And she said, "No, no, 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 no. I don't want to burden the train. Therefore, I'm going to continue carrying the basket." This is like that. What we do in life is just like that. Ishvara's portfolio. Even your child is Ishvara's portfolio. That is why it is named Prasada. I told you. And so it is all Bhagavan. You are just a managing trustee at best. And that's why Ishvara keeps you on your toes, because you cannot abandon the duty. You cannot say Ishvara will cook dinner because I attended a few satsangs on what? Yoga in Bhagavad Gita, and I was told to leave everything to Ishvara. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the movies. I'm going to do other things. And then dinner will be taken care of Ishvara by Ishvara. No, the ability to do is also Ishvara, your karmendriya, your organs of actions, and your free will, and the ability to do your talents. And that duty is where the free will is harnessed and hitched on to the wagon of dharma. And then that dharma gives preparation for knowledge, for self knowledge. And then the will becomes surrendered to the knowledge of the self, Vedanta. Without bhakti, there is no mukti. No mukti without bhakti. That devotion one has to cultivate deliberately, because even though one is naturally born devoted, there is a interruption in this devotion due to childhood hurts, pains, sorrows, fears, all kinds of things. There is an interruption. There is a distrust. There is a distrust of authority figures. Why? Because the primary caregivers often become primary scaregivers. You have to add an S in front of care. From care to scare. This is what happens. So the primary scaregivers make one very distrustful of authority figures. And what is Ishvara? Authority figure. And what is Guru? Authority figure. So this distrust has to be cleansed from the heart. Otherwise, one transfers onto Bhagavan all the pains and sorrows of childhood, some kind of an unfulfilled needs in relation to authority, the original authority figures, i.e., mother and father. It may be the best mother, it may be the best father that you had, but still they had some difficulties. They are also human beings. They were also fallible. Mother sometimes unavailable. Father irritable. Unavailable plus irritable. Being raised by that leads to distrust. And then, in certain families, there's only conflict. You express love also by having a nice fight at the dinner table. Some dynamics are like that. If you don't fight, then the food is not digested. So this also has to be understood. Vedanta and yoga is the preparation. Karma yoga is incomplete without this self reflexivity. Without this introspection, without this ability to introspect, it is incomplete. The knowledge is always, received with inhibition. It is an inhibited, truncated, punctuated knowledge, because the cobwebs of distrust and the wall of distrust is still there. And so, even though the Lord sits right in the heart, there is no darshan possible, because there is the transference of distrust onto Ishvara and onto all authority figures. Why? Because there is the remnants of this distrust that create a veneer, a patina of subjectivity in front of the eyes, so that whatever I see is a vision of division. It is not a vision of oneness. It is a vision of division. I am separate. And then any kind of an authority figure that I meet, or anybody that triggers some kind of a pain from the past, re-stimulates that pain, immediately that person becomes suspect, and I'm not able to deal objectively. This subjectivity has to be removed in order to live in the world of Ishvara without prejudice, without without the preferences to avoid discomfort, without the prejudice of judging oneself and judging others. This is precisely this distrust, unless it is removed, has a abiding presence in the antahkarana, the psyche, and denies the fruit of this knowledge. The fruit of this knowledge is to be free of everything that one doesn't want, is to be happy without limits. And that happiness is not something to be gained by action, it is something to be discovered as the truth of oneself. And that knowledge always is received with some editing, with some, always some inhibitions. Because when the child is born, the child has total trust. Anybody, you try to pick up a newborn baby, it will come to you. It has no other option, because it is totally helpless. It cannot turn over, it cannot tell you what it wants. Same kind of cry for colic pain, for hunger, for nappy change, same kind of cry. No other means of communication. And the parents have to do guesswork. What does this baby want? And if they are not very experienced, the baby is already having indigestion and stomach pain, and they think it is hungry and give it another bottle. So this is what happens. Same kind of cry. And then, you pick up the child, it allows itself to be picked up. Why? It allows itself to be picked up precisely because that complete helplessness is compensated by total trust. This is Ishvara Srishti, Ishvara's creation. The total helplessness is compensated by total trust. And then what? As the child grows up, the brain starts to develop. It puts cause and consequence. It knows what are the things that make the mother mad, what are the things that tick off the father. All these things it knows. And it also learns with a heavy heart that these are not primary caregivers, these are primary caregivers. It learns. It drops, the trust drops slowly because it sees the inconsistencies. It sees the inconsistencies, and the child being small is afraid, and then it naturally looks to the parents to be the saviors. And one fine day the child sees a big cockroach. It goes and hugs the mother, catches on tightly to her dress, and points scared with fear to the cockroach. And unbeknownst to the child, the mother is even more afraid of the cockroach than the child. The mother abandons the child right there and then climbs onto the dining table. And And the child feels literally, the dropping of the trust. Here I thought I could rely on this being who is bigger than me, and I got scared of this weird little thing that is shimmying around in circles, not knowing where it's going. I'm afraid of this weird looking insect. And then the mother climbs the table, and then climbs onto the table and dials the father on the cell phone. The father is in the other room but doesn't even come into this room. The father says, call the exterminator. So, like this, there is a loss of trust. And that loss of trust is automatic. It is again Ishvara Srishti, Ishvara's creation. And then what is for us to do is to regain that trust back, without which, my friends, life is not worth living. Life is not worth living with all the stalactites and stalagmites of distrust and suspicion growing in the damp cave of the heart. It is really simply not worth living. Anybody comes towards one keeps on suspecting, one keeps on judging. What a burden, what a way to be. No freedom, no inner freedom, no freedom in relating to people, no freedom in relating to Bhagavan. One is distrustful even of Bhagavan. One accuses Bhagavan of partiality, one accuses Bhagavan of all kinds of things. And therefore, the distrust centered on the primary caregivers, the drop of trust that happened as the unconscious mind grows up till the age of 4, whatever one experiences, that is what is called the unconscious mind, which is the storehouse of inner resentment, fears, tears, etc. That has to be remedied with the help of the free will. Something has to be done in order to right that. In order to right that, something has to be done. And this cannot be accomplished until one, takes hold of the free will and rediscovers this trust, okay, not distrust, rediscovers this innate trust by relating to the mother and the father of the universe. Infallible is Ishvara. We cannot say Ishvara is infallible, that is a setup. By relating to the Jagat as Ishvara, Jagat means the universe, the manifest universe, by relating to everything in the manifest universe as Ishvara, by discovering that trust which was lost in relation to the local parents, can only be gained by discovering this trust in the new parents, the mother and father of the universe. Because here it is impossible to get disappointed. Why? Because the disappointment, as one grows as a devotee, one understands that this disappointment is also part of another very important but often ignored order of the Lord, the psychological order. Your disappointment, your distrust, your loneliness, your sense of anxiety, your sense of separation is all within the order. That is why if you go to the therapist, they will say exactly this. Considering your background, that you feel these feelings right now is not a surprise. Not a surprise means what? They have studied this. The psychotherapists, the psychologists have studied this. They studied the human mind in great detail, and they know that this kind of a neglected upbringing, for example, can lead to issues of trust later. They have made that connection. In fact, they have not made the connection. They have discovered that there is a connection. Ishvara made the connection. It is an Ishvara's law. And here alone is a beauty here. Because suddenly your loneliness, your fears, your tears, your distrust is what? Is not yours anymore. Lay down that burden. Stop carrying the basket of distrust. Lay it down. Why? Because this distrust too is part of a larger psychological order. This distrust is also Ishvara. How beautiful this is. See? This distrust had in the past a compensatory and an important function of what? Self protection for the child. This distrust had an intelligent function which is not needed anymore because now you are an adult, now you have the mechanisms to protect yourself. And this discovery is immediately you no longer feel alone and lonely and ashamed of your emotions. You are one with the Lord. As soon as you understand, not just me, but all the jivas from Iceland to India are subject to this distrust, then it is no longer your distrust to carry. Give that to Ishvara. Pray to be free. Pray to understand this. See, there is no more loneliness because it's part of a very important or universal law of psychology. So, in other words, the disorder is also part of the order. What we consider disorder is part of the order. So, as one discovers this, then you see that the Jagat, the universe, is free of all, is not directed at you. The universe is free of being personally in the position of targeting you as an individual. The universe simply is. But then what about my disappointment? The devotee soon learns that the disappointment is within the order. Then what happens? The word my connected to disappointment, distrust, fears, tears, etc. The word my drops. Yes, there is disappointment. And along with the disappointment, yes, there is God given ways to deal with the disappointment individually, collectively, etc. Relatively speaking, the absolute remedy for disappointment and distrust is self knowledge, but relatively speaking, in the empirical world, there are numerous upayas, remedies to deal with this disappointment. And so, when you own up that, when you see yourself as part of the whole universe, disappointment is part of the order, sorrow is part of the order, distrust is part of the order, conflict is part of the order, what you consider disorder is also part of the order. Then what happens? There is objectivity. You accept the disappointment, and in the acceptance of the disappointment as prasada, there is a separation. And this separation is a very, very important separation between the adult, I, now, here, with the desire to study, with the desire to accomplish many things, with the desire to help people, with the desire to be free. All these things. These are all valid desires. With the desire to do my swadharma properly, with the desire to discover my talents and use them in service of the society. All these are valid desires. So these desires are free. Free enough to just fulfill themselves without the shadow of pain and sorrow. This is a very important articulation of Swadharma. Very, very important. And so therefore there is there is something beautiful about this. There is something beautiful about accepting one's distrust, accepting that there is disappointment. There is some inner space between the adult here and now, the one that is equipped with with everything that I need in order to deal with life, versus the remnants of the inner child, or rather we can say inner children. Sometimes they are inner brats, so they wanting attention and putting their fears onto the adult. This separation is very, very, very important. And the adult looks upon the inner child with love and allows it to slowly integrate. And if you see the manifestations of Lord Shiva in the what's its name, in the temples, etc., in the form of Nataraja, in the form of Lord Dakshinamurti, you see something which is very beautiful. The Lord is there in all his glory, and then underneath there seems to be, underneath the right foot, there seems to be a small baby. And then you say, why is the Lord trampling on a baby? Then you look closely, it is not, doesn't seem to be a baby, it's a strange creature. It's a kind of a dwarf with the mustaches, so it's an adult. And then it looks very fierce. A dagger, a drawn dagger in one hand and a shield in the other. Offensive and defensive. That is the inner child, dedicated to the feet of the Lord. It is called apasmara. This, it's a little, people call it a demon. It is not a demon. It is a truncated inner child. Apasmara. Apasmara in Sanskrit means the that which haunts through previous past memories. Clearly this is the inner child. And so the grace of the Lord, the right foot of the Lord, is a metaphor of how to manage the inner child. Heal, you say. Pun intended. H-E-E-L. H-E-A-L. This is what the whole thing is. And this inner child it has to be surrendered to the adult, not the other way around. It cannot run the show. And what is the inner child? Don't get confused. It's the same thing that we have been talking about from the beginning, raga and the bunch of raga and dvesha that have come to light, that have come to life in the form of, as though they are independent individual beings, little beings who are demanding like children, who are impervious to logic, again like children, who want to run the show. They don't have a sense of time or place. They don't have a sense that, okay, there are all these guests and I should not have a tantrum. In fact, that is precisely when they will have a tantrum. And so, this is what is the inner child. And then the dedication of the inner child to Bhagavan, meaning managing it. And who is the Bhagavan here? The adult. You, as the adult, manage and soothe the inner child and discover that as part of your devotion. It's exactly like how you manage a baby. Same way. The mother, if you are the mother or the father, the parents know. The child says, I want to play. The parents know, no, no, actually the child is very, very tired. It doesn't want to play at all. And so the mother lets the child cry, just puts her on her back and, soothes her, and in 2 minutes the child is asleep. This is exactly what one has to do with the inner children. Allow them space when you are able to counsel them as an adult. You have to gain their trust, because these are all distrustful inner children. You don't have the distrust. It's the inner children in the form of unfed raga and dvesha. And those ragas and dveshas, no matter how much you feed the inner child, it will always be a hungry ghost. It will not be full, because these are all frozen needs that can never be fulfilled. And therefore one comes up, one separates oneself from the inner child. And therefore, in order to do this, how do we do this? Thankfully, there is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. This particular yoga is there. The beautiful verses 22 and 23 of the 6th chapter. I will be chanting just verse 23, and we will understand the relevance of this to whatever I have spoken. तं विद्या दुःखसंयोग वियोगं योगसंज्ञितं स निश्चयेन योक्तव्यः योगो निर्विण्णचेतसा. They're very interesting and a very, Bhagavan is having a little bit of fun in this verse in the form of a pun. And because after all, it is Lord Krishna, he is very playful. So he does a little bit of a word play. He says, Tam Vidyat. Please know that. Know what? Tam Vidyat Yoga Samgitam. Yoga Samgitam means know this to be called as yoga. What is this? Dukkha Samyoga Viyogaha. Yoga. So yoga usually means association. Correct? Yoga means connection, association. We saw that one of the meanings of the word yoga earlier. We saw that. But here, Bhagavan Krishna is playing with the words and he says, Tam vidyat dukkha samyoga viyogaha yoga samgitam. Know this to be known as yoga. And oh, what is this third definition of yoga? Dukkha samyoga viyogaha is equal to yoga. Dukkha samyoga, association with sorrow. Yoga, association. Samyoga, a well entrenched association. Dukkha samyoga, with sorrow. Know that the well entrenched association that you have going on with sorrow, that is not yoga. Viyoga from that, separating from this well entrenched association with sorrow, is equal to yoga. In other words, dissociation from association with sorrow is equal to yoga, the third definition of yoga. Brilliant. And the second line, Sa nishchayena yoktavyaha. Hitch your wagon to this definitely, O Arjuna. To this yoga is not optional. This yoga is also very important like the other two yogas. Yoktavyaha, join your pursuit, join your commitment to this yoga. Why? Why should I do that if you ask? Then, yogaha anirvinna chetasa. Because follow this without boredom, without neglect, with a cheerful mind, and then you will see the difference, you will see the freedom. And that freedom is described in verse number 22. Guruna api dukkhena na vichalyate. And this yoga is the ticket to happiness and contentment on the relative level of the jagat of one's body, mind, sense complex. It's this relative cheerfulness that is going to finally lead you to discovering yourself as absolutely and always cheerful. This is again one of the paradoxes of Vedanta, that in order to discover yourself as Ananda, you have to have some relative cheerfulness. And so discover yourself as relatively cheerful. So dukkhena guruna api. Guruna means not guru here. Guru here neuter noun. Guru means heavy. Even by the heaviest of sorrows and the heaviest of blows that life may give, one is not perturbed, na vichalyate, one is not distressed, one is not shaken and derailed from oneself, from one's pursuits, from one's cheerfulness. This is the promise. In fact, the promise comes before the method that is given. The method is given in verse 23 of the 6th chapter, and the promise is given in verse 22. Knowing which yoga, following which yoga. And what is this yoga? Conscious dissociation from association with sorrow. Practicing this yoga consciously. One is gifted. What is the prasada of this yoga? The prasada of this yoga is this inner strength, inner confidence, and this cheerfulness, because one is unshaken by sorrow. By even the greatest of blows, one is able to have a tranquility in the face of all disturbances surrounding oneself. This is a very wonderful thing. But then how, oh how do I cultivate this as a dissociation from association with sorrow? And that also is given. This is also given in the fifth chapter. The whole thing was already given at the beginning of the sixth chapter and end of the fifth chapter. Sparshan bahyan bahihi kritva. Very intriguing injunction by the Lord. Keep the external world outside. Array, what a funny thing this is. Why is it called the external world? Please tell me. Because it is already outside, correct? This is a no-brainer. Because the world is outside, I call it external world. And here, Lord Krishna has put me in a conundrum because he's asking me to keep the external world external. External world being already external, what does it mean to keep it external? Well, the truth is that the external world has a way of seeping under the skin. It bleeds, into the psyche. In other words, things are internalized when they should not be. Situations are internalized. Triggers are internalized. People are internalized. One's own omissions and commissions are internalized in the form of guilt and hurt. Other people's omissions and commissions are internalized in the form of deep affront, feelings of affront and defensiveness. And so one's own parents, in the form of bundles of unmet needs, childhood needs and expectations, are internalized. And one goes about one's life as an adult, scattering these internalizations, strewing them everywhere, and wondering why my world is so cluttered with sorrow, despair, dejection, and fear. Because this what belongs outside is taken in. That's why this particular yoga is of great pragmatic utility. Great use. It has a great, it's very, very practical. It is of great use for us to grow as human beings. That's why even in the English language we have an expression. I can't stand this person, so and so, whoever it may be. I can't stand them. Why? They are getting under my skin. Do we not say that? This means that they have an effect on you. As soon as you say something is getting underneath the skin, there is an effect. They are having an effect on you. Oh, but that's because of their problem. No, it is not. They are who they are. And maybe they have a karmic purpose in your life to discover yourself. This is what the whole thing is. Maybe they have come with a karmic purpose. And like the wife of the saint Tulsi Das, who wrote the Ramacharita. This Tulsi Das was a very wonderful saint. And the story goes that he had a wife that he dearly loved. She was very beautiful apparently, and he was just so in love with her. And then she went to her parents' house, which was on the other side of the river, for a short holiday. And then she was going to come back the next day, or 3 days. But then there was a sudden flood due to incessant rains, and the river just grew, and so she was unable to come back. She was unable to return. And Tulsi Das was not able to bear the separation. And he waded, swam in this dangerous river full of undercurrents, full of all kinds of things. And then he reached to the other side, and he couldn't even find her neighborhood because it was all underwater, most of it. He was so worried and he was so beside himself. He had to see her to make sure she was okay and to, give, assuage the loneliness and the fear in his heart. And then he finally saw that even though the first story of their house, he finally found the house, and he was so relieved that the first story of the house, with little bit of water, yes, but they had all repaired to the second story and everybody was safe. So he called out her name, and she just was so, she least expected him to come, and in that too in this kind of flood conditions. And she just opened the door of the upstairs window and looked out to see who this was. And she was shocked. He's bobbing up and down in the water and so happy to see her. And he says, "Oh, Priye, oh beloved, I'm now united with you. I just don't know how how I have spent the last 3 days, sick with worry, sick with love, sick in your separation." She was a very astute and a wise lady. And she said, "Look at yourself. Look at the condition that you are in. Look at this helplessness that you are seeing and feeling. Just because I was away from you for 3 days. And you see that this body, this mind that you love as me is going to drop away." She was a Vedantin. This mind is going to drop away, this body is going to age. And the same body that you are in love with today, you will look upon with boredom and distaste in a few years, in a few decades. And here you are, focused on me. And if you put half the effort that you put to find me today toward, if you direct this strife, this longing towards God, think about all the bounty that you can get. And she sent him back. She didn't even let him spend one night in the in-laws' house, even in that weather. He said, "How will I go back? Just the way you came. Please go back. Go back. Wait for the weather to go, to separate, to become. Wait for the waters to go to separate. Wait for the weather to get better. I will come back when it's possible." She sent him back, and that is what made him a saint, really. He understood his mistake, and so she made him direct this internalization of this longing in order to seek the mother and the father of universe in the form of his Ishta Devata, the Lord Rama. And that is how he composed the very holy, beautiful version of the Ramayana called Ramcharitmanas, a very, very lovely, say in the form of couplets, which is chanted everywhere in India, even outside of India. It is very, very famous. And so, that is the fruit of his devotion. We owe thanks to her for his devotion, really. So this is how the internalization of the sorrow causes a great deal of pain, and that sorrow has to be externalized by giving things in the world the space to be what they are. You allow people, situation, events, things, the space to be who they are. You give them the space to be who they are. In fact, the secret is this: even if you don't give them space, they are who they are. Better to understand that. This is what is called, this is what is called this is what is called surrender. And surrender of the ahankara at the feet of Bhagavan in the form of this small little baby dwarf, fierce looking, defensive and offensive. You let that go. And how to do that, we will see more in the last session tomorrow. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ. There is a question here. What is Tulsi Das's wife's name? I have no excuse for this, but I have forgotten. I will find out and tell you tomorrow. Oh, somebody else knew. Thank you. Ratna. Thank you. Yes. Ratna Bai. Correct. Very nice. Thank you so much.
We would like to thank very much Swamini Svatmavidyananda. Let's give her a big hand. And she will continue tomorrow in the morning satsang.